Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, but as I really like to say, making connections through music with the intention of creating peace. And that is how I am here today for this interview by Zoom. I'm in Studio One at the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, and our guest is out on the West Coast, and introduced definitely through a connection in music, Linda Helms, who told me about a fabulous guitar player who's doing some really cool stuff for educating kids and helping them with music, etc., helping them learn. Brent Paschke. Brent, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, well, you've had quite a career, and I mean, people can look that up if they want, but you've been playing guitar for a long time, and I guess you've sort of hooked up somehow with Pharrell Williams years ago and been playing with him ever since, and that certainly, you've seen a lot of things from that perspective, I guess.
Yeah, I have. That was a really great connection. I met him back about 20 years ago. Him and Chad, when they had a production team called the Neptunes, and they still do some stuff together. They started doing a little bit more stuff together again. So
yeah. And you, I guess you were one of the founding folks for musicians for Spymob, and you played with a whole bunch of groups, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. It all kind of started with the band Spymob that I was one of the founding members of. We were a band for quite a long time, 12 or 16 years or something like that. So we had a nice little span of time. We had multiple record deals, nothing really that blew up for us. We did get an album out. And then, kind of midway in there, that's when we got connected with Pharrell and Chad, and that kind of spawned off a whole new thing, which is super exciting and something I always wanted to do also. So.
Oh my gosh, you were pretty happy about that, I guess.
Yeah, that was great. Well, it was early on, and it was 2001 when we met those guys, and they were like considered this hip hop production team, and they were doing a lot of just producing for people, and they had this first album that they were going to put out, their own kind of alter ego band called NERD. No One Ever Really Dies is what it stands for. And once when we connected, they were just fans of our band, and we were mostly live musicians. We had toyed a little bit with adding some electronic stuff into the mix, but 2001 it was not nearly as easy to kind of make those two collide. There's some technicalities in there that gotta work out right, and it was a little bit tougher, but it was such a fun challenge. So yeah, that I was really interested in at that time, because I thought that would be a movement that would be really cool, and sure enough, it did end up being really cool. And the first album that we played on that ends up being like kind of a landmark NERD album, the debut album, In Search Of, it's called. That's kind of a landmark album. Wow. It's influenced a ton. In fact, a ton of the rappers out and hip hop guys out now are really, really influenced by that first album.
Wow, that's just really cool. And so I doubly appreciate that you're taking the time to talk a little bit with us about this podcast, for the podcast. So, but we did talk a little bit before about kind of how you got started in music and your trajectory, and going to school and learning and all that. But when did you start? Did you start pretty young? Did your parents play? Was there a lot of music in your house, or were you a rebel and you grabbed a guitar, or how did that sort of come about?
I think it was in me, Jeff. Like some people you kind of know, it was just in me. I didn't really come from a huge musical family or anything. My toyed around. My dad played actually a little bit of an acoustic guitar, I remember, when I was really young, and my older brother played drums, and that all kind of helped me get into the mix. But it was around 12 years old or so, and my older brother's friend brought over a guitar, and I was like, oh my God, that's it.
That's
it.
it.
And I remember the first time getting a guitar, literally the first day I got it, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I, like 12, 13 years old. Yeah, I can't remember, but I just knew that was the path I wanted to take. And it was rock and roll, it's bands like Kiss and then it got into the, a little bit later into the, more hair metal bands. And then I transitioned into, a super 70s music geek loving like bands like Steely Dan and the Beatles. And that's kind of where I stand. I think I was listening to Peter Frampton this morning. So I'm a 70s. I always say I wish I should have been, in my 20s in the 70s or something playing music. That's
yeah. Well, I mean, it's so fortunate, but it also is a tribute to you and knowing what you want. A lot of people don't know what they want even after they've lived their whole lives, and certain also being, being tapped on the shoulder by music. It doesn't happen to everybody all that early. Kind of happened to me later, but that's really fortunate. I mean, then you just have a path and a passion, don't you?
Yeah, and that's I think, Jeff, that's one of the reasons that's one of the key-ins I think on why we connected here too, is that one of my passions for education was if I had that, and that I realized that I was lucky to find that passion early. That I didn't really realize that it doesn't happen as much as I think, I just knew, but I guess, kids probably at 12 years old don't know they want to be a doctor just yet or something,
right.
There's, but and that's what kind of drove me to education music education was that I thought, what if there's gotta be a lot of other kids out there like me. And I was grateful and lucky to have music education in school. I had jazz band in high school that I took, and I had music theory class, and and then I was very fortunate. My parents were very supportive. My dad and mom hugely supportive of me as a musician.
That's great.
So that's why, I wanted to kind of push into music education a little more and try to figure out how could kids get this music education for little to nothing if they have that, because some kids don't have parents that have the money to fork out whatever it is a month for guitar, piano, drum lessons, whatever it is,
or unfortunately a lot of kids nowadays don't have music classes. I mean, I went to Catholic school, and it was in, the 60s and 50s, 60s. And I think we had nuns with little pitch pipes, and we sang. And I don't even remember the opportunity to have an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so great. But could you talk a little bit about, because you had mentioned this, that, I was one of those kids who sat in the front row and was kind of the teacher's pet and, did everything, I kept quiet and all that kind of stuff. But I think you said you were kind of restless. I mean, it wasn't exactly the trajectory for your school, and the music was, an outlet or something. I mean, you knew you wanted to do it, but it was just about your educational.
I figured it out early. I figured it out when I got to school. I was a very creative kid, right? I loved drawing. I loved looking through books with, cool pictures. And I was always drawn to art, and that doesn't really fit in the model, in the school model. And so I one of the things that was kind of a key moment in my life, it was being held back in first grade. And I remember thinking, when that happened, it's pretty, being held back in first grade is a pretty traumatic experience. And I remember kind of thinking what the heck? I'm the best artist. I'm the best, I get all that. And I couldn't quite wrap my head around it, just had a different way of learning and just had a different way of doing things. I always had a creative slant on it, And it's just, school doesn't quite, at that point, that was my grade school, so it didn't, and that was a Catholic school, grade school. It just didn't pair up with that. So that unfortunately gave me a bad taste for education, So at that point, you just kind of, and you can't quite figure it out. It was early on, my parents, I think back to it now, my parents were in their 20s. I don't think they really knew how to have the discussions with me, nor was there really that many statistics out for what kind of repercussions might happen with being held back. And, they didn't probably know how to talk to me. There were, a couple guys, couple kids that grew up on a farm, so I just kind of took it at, screw school, I don't care. And that now, that's not how I am at all. I'm not, that was all triggered by just a bad experience, And so now when I teach classes to kids, I really encourage them, it doesn't matter. Just get in there and really use this time to take everything in.
Yeah. So. Certainly a lot of kids, I remember boys growing up in different classes, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they couldn't keep still. They were doing this, they were doing that. And, there's a mold and everybody doesn't fit that mold. So, you want to talk about, how you kind of then got into the educational aspect of it?
Yeah. So my getting deeper, I did teach like guitar lessons and things like that. Cause I excelled in music from hard work. Music wasn't,
that's what it
music
takes.
Music didn't it wasn't like I picked up a guitar and it's, I'm so natural. It wasn't that. It was just, it resonated so much with me that I put in a lot of work to get my fingers to move with what my head was thinking,
Yep.
And so, I did teach lessons early on and whatnot. Then when I grew up in North Dakota. I moved to Minneapolis and started a band. And I didn't have a lot of time to teach at that point. I was playing gigs at night and things like that. But then when I was around about 40 years old or so, so I'd done a lot of touring and I'd played on a bunch of albums. This is past my record deals and whatnot. I was doing more production. And I'm in LA and there's all these little kind of recording studios in one building. And it's really fun. It's really awesome because you have just your neighbor's another producer, another neighbor, and so you have about 7 rooms full of all these producers. It's really fun. But I would see all these kids come in, and they would just be flocking in like it was the the mid 19th century, flowing to the west. It's like wagon trail of them. And they would be coming in to 18 years old, fresh out of grad. These guys must have grabbed their diploma and got in the car,
looking to be rock stars.
Yeah, man, looking to be rock stars, wanting to be music producers. And they'd come in and just looking at these guys sleeping on couches, right. I don't know where they're even getting their food from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they just had just great, if somebody's going to make that move, there's something, and do what they did, there's something special about them.
Than driving them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that drive in a musician. That is just so inspiring to me. So I would talk to them and I'd kind of, they would find out who I was, and who I play with. And immediately, you're getting a million questions. And, and I would try to offer them whatever advice I could, And the question would come up I would say, okay, I know you want to program beats and you want to be a producer and you want to program beats, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to know all the music theory, all that stuff, that you know as much as you feel you need to know, and if you want to go all the way down the road, great. If not, whatever, as long as you can kind of get your ideas out, right? So I'd ask them, I'd say, well, when you're in school, what what music classes did you take? Well, there was no music classes. And I continued to hear this over and over. So at that point, I didn't pay that much attention to like what the public school systems were doing for school. I would kind of hear, well, music's getting kind of chopped out or arts are getting chopped out, but I never really paid that much attention and realized it was really getting chopped out, you know? So I started to think, wow, like how does a kid nowadays in school, how do they approach learning to be a musician that they want to be today? Like a today's musician, how do they do that? So, and when I say today's musician, I think this is somebody who wants to be a producer who makes beats. And this is different than what I did when I grew up, right? Like for one, there was a Commodore 64 in our house, I think. You know?
Yeah.
And like, you know, so there wasn't like computers to make music. I had a 4-track cassette recorder and we played instruments, right? And these guys came in and, you know, you got guys who want to make beats, be a DJ, whatnot. This is all required. Everything is a computer, you know, that's kind of the instrument, right? The computer is the instrument. So I started thinking, how do we do this? Well, one thing, if I could break it down to simplistic steps of what you do as a musician, like playing an instrument, is you deconstruct a song and then you reconstruct it with your band, right? So, you know, I want to, you pick up your guitar, your buddy picks up drums, somebody bass, and somebody's singing, and you go, cool, we're going to get together tomorrow and learn a Led Zeppelin song. You know, we're going to learn Stairway to Heaven or something, and then we're going to play it. So what you're doing as a guitarist and drummer or whatever, you're deconstructing that song to learn it. You're taking it in small pieces. You're learning each piece of that song, right? So you learn in pieces, you know, sections as a guitarist, right? Or any instrument in sections, and then you're learning that whole piece, right? And then so is the drummer doing the same thing, and so is the singer and whatnot. You're deconstructing it and then you're reconstructing it. So I thought, how could I do that? So how could I apply that same process to teaching somebody today? And that's when I started to think, why don't we take songs that are done by big producers and deconstruct them and then teach people how to reconstruct them? So that was kind of my first, that was the first idea, you know, was do a deconstruction, reconstruction process, kind of try to redo what I did when I was younger with all my friends and bands and do that on a computer. What I ended up doing was going with an iPad and then using GarageBand, which is an Apple product. And iPad, I could go phone, whatever, iOS, I should say iOS device, because GarageBand's on any iOS device. And the reason I did that is because GarageBand is, I mean, just there is hands down no better, there's not a better free software. I mean, it's built by Apple. It's been, I mean, the amount of money that's been put into it, I can't even imagine, you know? So that's what I wanted to do. I chose iOS devices, GarageBand, and then I picked a song, and that's when I was a co-founder of this company called Tuniversity. And
Tuniversity.
Tuniversity.
T-U-N, like tune.
Yep, like university with a T.
Yeah.
And then we I had this idea. I sat on it for a bit, tried to kind of come to all these conclusions, and then I thought, okay, this is cool. I think there's something here, and I went to Pharrell and actually went to an investor first, and then I went to Pharrell with the investor, and I said, I think Happy would be a great song to do, you know, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
And he thought it was a great idea. So he gave me the session for Happy, and I deconstructed it and then talked about the deconstruction of it and then showed people how to reconstruct it. And they could do it all on an iOS device. So if you have an iPhone, you can just download GarageBand and reconstruct Happy with the book that we made.
Wow. Is kind of a curriculum or step by step, or you put out a book and then people bought the book, and did you do lessons too, or how did? So what we did was we tried to keep it all under that umbrella of Apple, because it worked so good, and
Apple Books are super sexy because you can put video in them and they have galleries and they you can build widgets inside of them, and it's like they're just you can do a lot of hot rodding to that platform. So we chose the Apple Books platform because then we could put these little widgets in there that people could practice rhythms to and things like that. And then they could just pop over from the book into GarageBand. So we could tell them a little, like, try this, and this, do this step, and they pop over to GarageBand and program it in and then jump back to the book and read some more. And
so it's sort of self-learning then. But
yeah,
with
it's
the
self-learning.
book.
Yeah, and it wasn't really a curriculum. It was just something we thought was a good first step, and there's a ton of cool factor to it. And if you tell people like, hey man, listen, you go through this book and you can make your own version of Happy. We show you how to sing it. We show you how to like program all the drums. We show you how to play the bass line,
wow,
and play everything in. And then you kind of have your own version of it, so we just did it as that. And then the plan was to kind of expand on it a little bit more than that.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really great. And the reason that you did this was really to help people be able to tap into that creative aspect of music, and so they can continue on. For me, I used to tell people, I was like, I'm more worried about giving kids the candy right off the bat. I was like, there's the very rare kid, and I learned this early on teaching lessons, right? The first time I started teaching lessons, I had everything ready. Like, oh, here's how I play scales, and here's how I do, chords and da-da-da-da. Kids wanted to play songs, man. They wanted to rock out like fast, They didn't want, like, I was, and I don't know, out of all the hundreds, I don't know what the stats would be, but it's probably not even 1 out of 10 might really continue it as serious as that, Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to kind of give the candy in there, so it could entice the kids. Cause I felt like I always put myself back in their place, right? I said, what would happen if I was 16 in school right now, or 12, 13, and I was in school and had that same kind of passion for music? What would happen? Well, I might not pick up a guitar. Okay, then if there was music in school and I go to school to go to music classes, they go, okay, cool, sounds great. Well, you can pick one of the band instruments. Well, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to be like Diplo. Maybe I want to be a producer. Like Pharrell's a producer. You know what I mean? Like that's his number one thing, and what happens to those kids, and Pharrell was a bit of an outlier because he had a lot of cool breaks and met up with Teddy Riley early on. So there's he's definitely got outlier written all over him, so what would happen if you don't have that? Well, let's give them something like the Happy Book that they can go in and start to do some music. We don't really talk a lot about, we don't talk any about music theory, but there's some fundamentals in there that we're sneaking in without them knowing it, Mm-hmm.
You clap on the 2 and 4 for this. There's 4 beat, you know what I mean? So teaching them how to count a few things. So my whole thing was, let's give them a little bit of the candy. And that's great, because what I notice with any of these producers is they will get going. They will start to make some beats. They will try things, and then eventually they'll go. I'll be run into them, and they'll go, "Yeah, Brent, I'd like to learn a little bit of guitar. I'd like to play a little guitar." Okay, now we got you into an instrument, Or they might even be like, "I want to play a saxophone. I want to do something." Well, cool. But if you're throwing that at them right off the bat, then they might not take music. Let's give them that candy. Give them something really fun, because we got to fight against Angry Birds, and we got to fight against all the other fun things that they're doing on the computer, on the iPad. So let's give them something.
So many good points I haven't even really thought about, although I guess I know. I mean, the computer really is the instrument. I mean, if you're gonna,
absolutely,
you you got to be able to record yourself, even if you're playing guitar. You got to be able to do all these things, which I don't really know how to do. But it sounds like a great way to get. I mean, that's the thing that younger people are seeing now.
It's absolutely it's absolutely the instrument. It's absolutely the instrument. Like, and for so many kids, it is the instrument. So, and it's, if you have an iOS device, if you have an iPhone, like you're a kid, and most kids have iPhones, it's in your pocket. So now it's free, you know? So why not, my whole thing was like, why not make a book or why not make some education that's just right there? I would love it if this was all over public schools. It's even just a tad bit of it, you know, just enough.
Oh my God. And, you know, boys and girls would love that kind of thing too, because opening up such I mean, everybody's musical, all kids are musical, being able to open that up and seeing that they could, you know, make a song like that, you know, with some instruction about it, not just winging it totally. Yeah. So the way that I mentioned her earlier, Linda Helms, I met her at Wooten Woods, and turns out she's also does, she asked me about podcasts is how we got introduced. And then she does sound bowls. And, you know, she's very passionate about it, very intuitive, very spiritual person. And she said, well, you've got to talk with Brent. And so what's the sort of the spiritual aspect of this to you, you know, of the music and of teaching the music and sharing that? I mean, it's obviously it's so powerful. The whole, I mean, it's almost like an expression. I use it all the time, the trite expression, the power of music. But my God, people go and get in their cars, and every time they get in their car, they turn on the music, and they have music on all day at work, and they have music here and there, and they go to see music for shows, and you know, it's just ubiquitous. But we need it. So, what are your thoughts on the spirituality of music? I know Linda's kind of very spiritual, and you know, the sound bowls, and you and she were talking a lot about, I think, about Tuniversity or some of your musical ideas, and
yes. Well, I think, okay, so I'm teaching a 7th and 8th grade class right now. And so this isn't really quite the spiritual side of it, but I wanted to tap on this because I think this is important for music in school, and especially where it's at today with technology. My thoughts too on this is like letting this, like, just like what you said, it's everywhere, right? So no matter, I tell my students, I say, listen, I don't know if even one of you will continue with this, because like I'm teaching an elective, just one 7th, 8th grade class elective music class. Great kids, they're so much fun. But I tell them, I say, it doesn't matter to me if you guys make these amazing songs. None of that matters to me. None of that. All I want you to do is try to make a connection with who you are as a person and express yourself and help find yourself with this and see what really resonates with you. You know, that was it. That, like, I'm like, get to know this, because there's a couple things that'll happen from that. Well, obviously we want to get to know ourselves better. We want to be more confident in ourselves, and playing music is like to break through and really find yourself. It's scary, right? Like, it's like to really express yourself, and then to express yourself and then feel comfortable in sharing that. Like, that's a big step. That's a huge step. That all relates to, how do I express myself? How do these kids express themselves when they're older, trying to get a job? How do they express themselves when they're older, you know, starting a new business of their own or whatever? Like, that all relates to that. And I also tell them, listen, I teach it on Garageband on an iOS device. And I also tell them, like, what's great about this is you're learning what looks like a very complex software. And what that's doing is telling yourself, like, hey man, this isn't that hard. Because I can teach them how to make something really cool really fast. Like, within my first class of teaching, I tell people, like, give me some kids that are about 12 years old. give me some kids that are about 12 years old. Within 1 hour, I will have all of them grins on their faces, feeling like, oh my gosh, I just made a beat on my own. I just made a cool song on my own. You know, like it can happen so fast. That's important because then they take that with them to know that any of this software they can handle at that point. They can handle it. They have the experience to like kind of follow their gut and get out of the software what they need to get out of it. So that's one of the things, and Linda and I are really on the same page of that. And then the spiritual side. I mean, that's easy. You can just go to the internet and look at how water, like this. There's this one I just saw how this guy distills water and looks at the crystals after they've played music to it and talked to it or had good thoughts about it, and it literally changes. Like the structure literally changes, and you can see it under a microscope. Like,
wow. And
we're like, they say between 40 and 60% water. So how can
obviously, yeah,
how can that not relate to us? You know what I mean? So it's like having some intuition with music, knowing how to play some, having just a little bit of a musical background, like all of that is going to make a difference. If water is changing with positive thoughts, positive words, positive pictures, they say, like they literally do this, like where they like tell it bad, angry words and whatnot in it, and the whole structure of it changes. Like, how can that not, you know what I mean? So like, if we get more comfortable with music, it's all makes sense. It's better for our lives, man.
Wow. That's, all that is really profound, Brent. I mean, when you're talking about finding yourself, it's hard for people even to know what they want. I mean, I've at a cocktail party recently, I'm talking to somebody, well, I just retired and I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, what's your passion? What's your purpose? He goes, I don't know, I was raking leaves today and I was happy about it. But that's a really important thing to be able to allow kids in particular to understand that, they can find themselves or that's something that they should even want to do or try to do. And it can be a little scary,
Yeah. It does. Like, listen, like it's not much different than sports. I don't think either. I think sports are good for kids too. I never was really too much into sports, but I definitely see the importance of it. And there's other things that it taps into, exercise and things like that, and teamwork is with music too,
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, we're not looking for happiness. Isn't the end goal. It's purpose is the end goal. I mean, you can hear that all over. Jordan Peterson preaches that up and down. Like we're looking for purpose, and anything we can do to tap into ourselves a little bit. And art is obviously a great place to go to tap into yourself. So any place we can tap into ourselves to help us find our purpose is great, Yeah.
I started late in music, and about 40 some got bit by the harmonica bug, started playing blues harmonica. And I remember just trying to learn this song, and it would be like months, but it was the most important thing in my day. It was it could give meaning. It kind of gave meaning to my life, to wanting to learn this song. And it's just such a underlying thing that we are.
Mm-hmm.
So other thoughts maybe about what people, society can do to more on a more broader scale to help. I guess if we figure out our purpose and we can tap into music to help do that, that's better for everybody.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The other thing I was going to say on this side of this is something I tell people. I do a lot of like mindful meditation now, and it's been really super helpful in my life, and so much of it parallels with music. And and I tell people, this is what's really great about music is that you can use music so much as a life teacher, right? Like, because here's what happens when you're playing. So let's say you're a musician and you're soloing. You're playing a solo. You're playing over a blues progression, just a straight up blues progression, and you're soloing. Which you've probably done with the harmonica, right?
Yep.
What's great about using this as a learning lesson is that, like, what happens when you're playing is that if you make a mistake, music's just going, right? You make a mistake, and when you make that mistake, you have a choice. You have a choice to accept the mistake, forgive yourself for it, use the mistake to learn from it, use the mistake to tail it off into something different. Or you can get down on yourself. You can continue to think about the mistake. You can let the mistake tell you that you're a horrible person and a bad player. Like, these are all things that relate, right? Like, this is in life, right? Like, if we make a wrong decision. So when you're doing this in music, if you're kind of consciously working and you're treating music and playing as like kind of a spiritual thing and something to kind of help you grow. Like, I tell people now, like, music for me, learning and practicing music is absolutely parallel with my mental health. Absolutely. I use it completely in parallel with my mental health, because when I'm doing that and I make a mistake, I then immediately, a millisecond after that, whatever decision I make, I feel it with the next thing I play or don't play. So you can use that always as you're playing. You use that to learn about yourself. So when you're playing, you learn to go, forgive myself. Like, that's okay. It's just a mistake. Move on. It's already gone. Nothing we can do about it, Or are you thinking too far ahead? Music teaches you to be absolutely present. Just like in mindful meditation, I always talk about coming back to the breath, right? You come back to the breath because the breath is always present. You can't, if you're concentrating on your breath, you're always in the present moment. So it's the same. It parallels the same thing with music.
Wow. Yeah. Such life lessons through music that
Absolutely.
Really parallel into this, a very spiritual aspect of being in the moment, being in the now.
It's absolutely being in the now. You can't, like, I can't go and start to, I sit down with you and you grab the harmonica, I grab the guitar, and we start doing a blues jam. I can't, like, start to solo and think, what am I going to do on bar 3 when I'm on bar 1? Nor can I, when I'm on bar 3, think about, gosh, man, what a horrible mistake on bar 1. That's life, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's life. It's all about being present. It's all about being present. And your best playing will be done when you're absolutely in the present moment and you're as honest with yourself as possible and forgiving, accepting, loving, caring. All of those things all line up with music. It's all absolutely in sync.
Yeah. Being a bit of an older guy and picking up guitar now in my 60s, it is hard, just as you said about you put in a lot of time to learn guitar. I mean, it's you do have to work at it. And it is hard getting out of your own head. You're playing along and all of a sudden you start thinking about something else and whoops. And, that's something that a lot of people want to learn, and for their lives too. People can't get out of their head in their lives, and people at work, and they get all upset about this and that. And, come on, just, let's get on with it. So that happened. Yeah.
All the time. And comparisons. Comparisons are, oh my gosh, man. Like, that's like, until you can, like, feel really comfortable with who you personally are. Like, there's millions of guitar players better than me, tons of guitar players better than me, like, in some way, shape, or form, and however better than me, whatever that means, right? Like, but if I'm sitting there playing thinking, like, man, I'm not as good as Guthrie Govan, one of my favorite players, like, how the heck are, like, I gotta play more like him, or like, that's not honest. you know?
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not being honest. I'm not being myself. Now I'm trying to speak like he speaks. Like, what does that say? It's all like, to me, this just all spiritually, it all intermixes unbelievably well, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You've been expressing this so well too, and it's something that when you say it, it feels intuitive and right. And you know, I've been talking with a lot of people about music recently, and I'm in. You know, it's just the most. I mean, we are music. You know, we're just absolutely music, and the whole world is musical, and we kind of, you know, we get out of tune, we get out of the present. You know, if we're thinking about a lot of other dumb stuff, money and politics and all that kind of stuff too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, any other kind of thoughts you might want to mention about, you know, your Tuniversity, or, you know, where do people locate that? Where do they find it? I guess you just go to...
The book is still up on the bookstore. The company at this point is kind of a little bit on hold. But the book is up on the bookstore, on the Apple bookstore, so people can still grab it. Still super proud of the book. It reads great. It's very simple. As far as education, especially in the songwriting, recording kind of area, I have a very big passion for the absolute, I've never played music person. And that's what that book is. That's who that book is directed for. It's like, I've never ever played music, Brent. I'm kind of afraid. Cool. That's the book for you. Go there. It's super simple. And you can get yourself through a song, you know, and once you get one under your belt, it feels pretty good, you know?
Yeah. So people can check that out. And, you know, I just really want to thank you for sharing some of these thoughts. You know, I will put this out in a couple weeks, and I put a few notes together, and I just love being able to write up what, you know, you've said, and others have said about the special aspects of music and what you were talking about, you know, being in the now, the spiritual aspects is really great, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll just keep trying to do it and make a better world, and stick with, I don't think music will let us down, you know?
No, I don't think it won't. It never has.
Yeah. All right, Brent. Well, thank you so much, Brent Paschke. Really appreciate it. You do have a website too that people can go to. I know. Yeah. I guess it's yourname.com.
Yep. BrentPaschke.com. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Brent. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Yep. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.